This is episode 42 of Standing Out. Standing Out is a remarkable interview style podcast with the intention to highlight women and men making outstanding contributions in their field. This podcast is generously sponsored by Think Global. Think Global is a business advisory firm working with women around the globe to scale their businesses to the next level. This podcast is also generously sponsored by Smash Fund. Smash Fund is for the dreamer who dares to dream, the entrepreneur who eats obstacles for lunch, and a place where passions, people, and life collide. You can find your special invitation code in the description of this podcast. Today, I'd like to welcome Ruth Hedges. Ruth is one of the world's foremost authorities on crowdfunding and is one of the original pioneers of a legislation that was ultimately signed into law as the Jobs Act on April 5th, 2012. She was honored with an invitation to the White House for its Crowdfunding Champions of Change event. Ruth created and operates the world's first global crowdfunding convention, GCC, which you can find at thegccworld.com, now entering its fifth year. It's hosted every year in Las Vegas, Nevada. Ruth, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So to start, I would love to know how you got involved in the world of crowdfunding.
Sure. So I have a software product. It's a business planning tool, and it was used to go to a bank for a loan or, present to an angel or a venture capitalist. And in the middle of the recession in 2009, obviously there was no money for anybody to get. And so a lot of my customers were saying, what are we going to do? How are we going to get funded? And so I started to do some research, and I'm giving you a very short version of a long story, but essentially I found some people who we all agreed that we would have to go and get an act of Congress to remove an 80-year-old securities law that prevented 240 million Americans from just investing in each other, because they were not considered accredited investors. So at the time, it was illegal to do this. And so we had to go to Congress. We spent 17 months getting signatures and writing the original framework, which was called the Startup Exemption. And we got a version of that to some congressmen on the floor of the House, and they added their 2 cents, and that version got voted on. And then the Senate added their 2 cents, and then eventually we got 417 congressmen, 2/3 of the Senate, and the president to sign it into law on April 5th, 2012. And today we have a new regulation that allows all of us to equally have a piece of a startup that could become the next Facebook or Microsoft or Yahoo or whatever.
What was the point of the previous law for having to have credited investors? Like what did that serve?
So 80 years ago, somebody could drive up to a farm in the middle of nowhere and approach a little, anybody in America, basically, with bogus stock certificates and try and sell them shares of stock in the next something or whatever was going on 80 years ago. And of course, there was no internet, and there was no way for any, and these innocent people were getting ripped off. Okay. So the SEC came in and the government came in and created laws. Of course, they went to the other extreme, which was to say we all needed to be protected, which we didn't. Mm-hmm. And so they decided that only wealthy people could afford to take a risk and invest in a startup. And so that's why up until this law was enacted, there was only 8.7 million people in this country who could own a piece of a company on the ground floor when the stock is cheap, like a quarter or 50 cents a share. The rest of us have to wait till it goes public. And then we end up spending $25, $50 a share. And of course, we're not really making the real money. The wealthy are making the real money.
Right.
So that's why this was so important, to be able to essentially level the playing field for access to capital and for investment opportunity for all of us.
So before this, have you ever done anything with Congress or legislation, or this was your first initiative, right?
Totally. Had no idea.
What was that? Because I kind of consider you like a layperson. Like you're like most of us who have never actually done that. So what was that experience like? Like how did it get going? And kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. So I actually read a blog post by a guy named Sherwood Neese in Florida, and I'm in Las Vegas, and I was literally reading myself on a blog post. You know how you read a blog and you think that's what I'm saying. That's. And so I called him and I said, I think you're my brother from another mother. And literally that started this, amazing friendship. And we just started to talk about these issues. And he was saying that there was a group of them some of his friends and partners were having the same conversations. And he was an entrepreneur who had tried to raise money for one of his companies. And that's why he got this issue became front and center for him. So we started to build this whole group of people. I mean, we got very lucky. Steve Case from AOL joined us. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce joined us. Mm-hmm. So we had a lot of prominent people who believed in this because they were seeing in 2009 this horrible recession, no job creation, nobody getting any funding, everybody's credit lines being taken away by the banks, et cetera, et cetera. And so and the funny part was the next year, the same Congress shut the government down and became paralyzed ever since. But we just happened to get this one bill through, and thank God we did.
Yeah. Was that, to get the bill through, for you, was that personally a lot of trips to DC, or is most of that done just digitally now? Or like, how does that work to get the bill through? Because my partners were in New York and Florida, it was easier for them to go and make a lot of these meetings. They took a lot of those meetings. I went to Washington a few times. Okay.
In fact, I was just there on Capitol Hill in May. On May 16th, the actual bill that I helped to write and get passed through Congress was the rules came out from the SEC. So I was on Capitol Hill on May 16th, launching this new securities offering with members of the World Bank was there, Doug Rand from the White House, and members of the House and Senate. And we celebrated finally putting this new regulation out in the marketplace for entrepreneurs to use to raise capital.
So that's fascinating. So tell us a little bit about crowdfunding, because as I understand it, there are different types of crowdfunding. Can you walk us through,
Sure.
Walk us through what those options are?
So there is what's called reward-based crowdfunding, which is like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and 1,000 other platforms around the world. It's where you have an idea for something creative, maybe a book, some music you want to publish, a game that you've created, some artwork, anything you can think of that you can exchange to the public for their money. So, for example, you have a prototype of something, but you don't have the money to manufacture the inventory. Mm-hmm. You can tell the public, if you give me some money now, I will give you a version of this thing below the manufacturer's suggested retail price. Once I get the inventory, I will ship you a copy of this thing. And that's how reward-based crowdfunding works. And it's now billions of dollars on these platforms. And the next one is called donation-based or cause-related crowdfunding. We all know GoFundMe, which is now several $1 billion of crowdfunding. Almost 100,000 campaigns launch every month on GoFundMe. And everything from Katrina to the Boston bombing to kidney transplants and everything in between, people's funerals, college tuition, you name it. People are crowdfunding and supporting each other, right. Which is amazing when you think about how long it took Jerry Lewis to put the telethon together every Labor Day. You know what I mean? Right? It took an entire year. And these people are raising millions of dollars. The Pulse nightclub raised $7 million in 5 days after, which is incredible. Because all those families, hundreds of people were harmed or dead, and and they needed immediate help to pay for funerals and all kinds of things. And so it is just a very powerful thing. And then the third one is what we now call regulation crowdfunding or equity crowdfunding, which is where you get to sell the stock and own a piece of the company. And so there's no reward in this one. There's no copy of the book or the music or tickets to the off-Broadway show. You're getting stock in that potential company. And
I think that is the one that's sort of lesser known by the general public. So how do they find opportunities like that?
Well, that's a really good question. It just went legal in May, and there is about 14 what's called funding portals. So if you Google funding portal, you would see the website that is legally allowed to sell these securities. You just can't go on Kickstarter and do this or Indiegogo. It's a special regulated website where that company had to go through FINRA and the SEC to be certified and, able to do this.
I see. And so for the company, it's a different process than what it would be if they were uploading to Kickstarter or something.
Correct. Right. Much, much, much more paperwork. They need a business plan. They need a valuation. Because obviously selling stock, what's it worth? How do you prove that it's worth that? You have to have an actual valuation. Then you have to have financial statements, cash flow, income, balance sheets, more documentation than you would on Kickstarter. There's no documentation like that. But you also need the social side. So you still need the video. Okay. You need the Twitter followers and the Facebook friends and all of that. And people need to Google you. This is very important. If you Google somebody and there's nothing there, it's just as bad as if there's negative things there. Because if you're really a thought leader in your business, and you want me to invest in you, then you should be out there. So there's all these kinds of things that we teach at the convention on, how to actually be successful raising this money.
So is that how the convention started? Basically, you saw a need of, okay, now we can do crowdfunding, but a lot of business owners don't really know how to do that.
Yeah, because when the final regulation came out, it wasn't the one that we submitted. The government got involved, and as usual, they made it more complicated, and they added more this and that. We have to protect everybody, and all this other stuff. So it requires it's almost like if you ever try to apply for a grant, how there's a lot of paperwork, or you ever try to apply for an SBA loan at a bank, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork for regulation crowdfunding. And so the public needs to be educated on how to work through all that. And of course, so do the lawyers, so do the accountants, so do the financial advisors. And nobody was out there teaching anybody this. And I was the first person to come up with this crowdfunding. Essentially, it was called a boot camp originally, but now it's turned into a global convention.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
So did you always know that you would be in an entrepreneurial space, or was there a different plan previously?
So I've been self-employed since I was 14 years old.
Oh my gosh. So
yeah, I've always worked for myself.
What did you do at 14?
I actually started a catering business. I did a box lunch for 300 women for Hedges, which is a Jewish women's organization. And my mother was like the president, and and I had been cooking for years, like since I was 10. Mm-hmm. So I was a seasoned chef at this point. Right. And so I made this little box lunch and brought all this food over and served 300 people. Yeah.
That's a lot of skill for a 14-year-old to coordinate 300 people. That's great. Yeah. What is one of the best pieces of marketing advice you could give someone, knowing that we're all at different stages of the journey and you have had such a robust career in a variety of things?
Start the moment you think people should be out there marketing themselves, period, end of story. Company or not, everybody's personal brand now is worth something. If they're going to be, even if they're going to be employed by someone else, that is a valuable thing. My daughter just graduated from college, and she has her own, she wants to go into the fashion world, and she's been building a fashion blog for years, just as a hobby. Yeah. But that's like now her biggest asset, because she can show her talent putting outfits together, getting the models, the shoots, the photo shoots, the blogging, the writing, all of that. So and then people have to do this every single day. Just like they check their emails, nobody prompts them to do it. It's not a laborious thing. They don't think of it as a job or a chore. They have to think of social media the same way. They need to spend at least 5 or 10 minutes every day, first thing of the day, end of the day, post a few things, tweet out a few things, connect to people, and then make it part of their sort of DNA. And it will pay back in like you can't even imagine.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, whether that piece of insight, because whether you're working for yourself or a corporation, you're right, there is value in having that audience and that thought leadership. And I think that's a piece of why so many people at corporations are starting their own blogs or having their own Twitter handles, like within the industry, but giving their own perspective. There's a lot of value.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know about you, but I think owning a business and being an entrepreneur, there's a lot of sort of roller coaster ups and downs with it. I'd love to know if you experience the same thing, and if you do, how you recover and stay committed to the bigger vision on some of those lower days.
Yes, of course. I mean, you wouldn't be an entrepreneur if you didn't have.
Like that comes with the territory.
It's right, exactly, because you're writing your own story. I mean, there's no pre-scripted, here's a job, and you come in 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, do this, leave then, start here, start there. You're driving the train, and you're building the train, and you're designing the train, and then you're designing the map to get you to the end, to the promised land. So you're obviously going to have a lot of good days and bad days and ups and downs and challenges with skill sets that you didn't buy into. This is the part of being an entrepreneur that most people don't understand, is if they're a talented painter and they want to start an art gallery. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello?
So if you think about this, most entrepreneurs are skilled in the talent that they brought to their business. They did not come to the position of the CEO or the founder with marketing skills, PR skills, writing skills, website design skills. I mean, the list just goes on, right? Yeah. You have to wear like 20 hats every day because you don't have the ability to just go hire 20 different people. And that's pretty much what it takes to run a business. There's dozens of things that have to get done every day. So you're challenged to learn a lot of new things. And if you're not wired that way, and it can be very frustrating and difficult, but if you are, then, you accept the fact that you're going to have some good days and bad days. Challenge.
And it's hard. It's hard wearing all those hats. And I think, especially in the starting phases when there isn't a budget to hire people for those positions that are outside of your scope, and then there's the pressure of learning how to do those things, there's definitely a learning curve, so to speak.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So back to the crowdfunding space. This is, as we wrap up, I would love to know, as a crowdfunding expert, what's one thing that's on your radar currently that you think in a year or 2 years from now we'll all be talking about?
Like I said early on, we now have the ability, 240 million Americans, to be angel investors. They just don't know it. And that is another learning curve, but a huge opportunity. If you look at how much discretionary money the American population has and spends on extravagant shoes or pocketbooks or trips or even gambling. I mean, something like $100 billion a year. Look at the lottery. I mean, there's a lot of money in this country that is thrown at things. Now we can invest in a startup. Will we all become rich? No, of course not. But we gamble our money on all kinds of things. And this is the best thing we should be doing with our money, because this creates jobs and it gives us an experience that we might not have ever had. For example, if I've always wanted to own a bed and breakfast in Santa Barbara. Well, I can't afford to buy the whole bed and breakfast, but maybe I could invest with 10 other people. And now all of a sudden I get to fulfill a dream, check that off my bucket list and experience the fun of owning a bed and breakfast.
That's really cool. And so to find those opportunities, people need to Google crowdfunding portals, right?
Yes.
And then to invest in those opportunities, are there generally limits or minimums or maximums for investing, or is it a little more fluid than that?
No. So there is the price of the stock. Every offering will be different.
Okay.
And what the minimum is, and the maximum is set by the Securities and Exchange Commission based on your income. So when you go to the funding portal, you'll be required to register and review a video, sign a document stating you understand the risks you're taking, that you could lose your money, and you will have to disclose your income, because you are only allowed to invest a certain amount. That's how remember the protection laws I was talking about earlier on? Well, this is how they get to protect the public, by just basically saying, look, you can only invest a few $1,000s every year. That way we know you're not going to lose your house and your car and mortgage the farm. And so, and all of that happens on the funding portal. So the entrepreneurs can find all that out when you get to the funding portals.
Well, that's interesting. I'm excited to check that out. Well, Ruth, thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I hope everyone comes to the Global Crowdfunding Convention this year.
Yes, it sounds great. Vegas is a great place to host it.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for having me.